Flags of Valor is a veteran-owned, veteran-operated, and combat veteran-made company, and we believe in three main ideas. Hiring veterans, specifically combat veterans. We believe that Made in America still matters, and we believe in giving back. So I came from a really small but big military family, and everyone in my family served, and not just served, but served in combat. I deployed 9 times, and on my 9th deployment I'd gotten injured, non-combat related, and I was going through some rehab after spinal surgery, and I didn't wear my uniform anymore. I didn't have that flag on my sleeve that I wore for 15 years, and I was looking for something really cool. I found a beautiful American flag, and unfortunately it wasn't made in America, and that upset me. And I went out into my my garage that next day, and I started woodworking and just started making American flags, and what I found was very therapeutic. As I was recovering from spinal surgery, I looked forward to woodworking every day. And so all of our craftsmen here are veterans and combat veterans. They really lean on each other, that they get the value, I think, in this company is that they talk about challenges they maybe experienced downrange. We're honored to have those guys, the men and women that served, because we know what drives them, and whatever they're going through, somebody here's experienced that. We are 23 months old now. We have 23 employees. 18 of those are veterans, and we've raised over $650,000 in the last 23 months for nonprofits and different organizations, and not to mention donated hundreds of flags. So it's important for us to always give back.
Ladies and gentlemen, Brian Stortz.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Brian Stortz, and I'm honored to welcome you to today's State of American Business event. As you just saw in the video, I'm the founder of a Virginia-based small business called Flags of Valor, and we make handcrafted wooden American flags. Our products are 100% American-made and sourced, and they're all handmade with pride from all of our combat veteran team. As I stand here today, across from this enormous flag in the back of the room, I'm reminded of the great honor that I got to have to serve our country. I'm also reminded of what makes America so special. It isn't our government or our leaders, it's our freedom, including the freedom to own and operate a small business in the most open and dynamic economy in the world. The American free enterprise system is special. It's what's given me and so many others the ability to create, innovate, and employ and build businesses on our own. Today, business leaders and workers across our nation are leading a resurgence in economic growth and prosperity. But we wouldn't be able to do that without the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. It's the protector of American free enterprise. It represents the interest of 3 million businesses of all sizes, sectors, and regions, and it follows some 300 issues relevant to them. It's the only organization of its kind positioned to represent the entire private sector, not just one industry or corner of it. And that allows it to forge consensus and cooperation on the challenges and opportunities facing all businesses. The Chamber's motto is the spirit of enterprise. And I can tell you that today, spirit is as strong as ever. Just look at the Chamber's work last year to secure victories on regulatory relief, tax reform, energy, and more. Victories that business leaders are now feeling firsthand. I was proud to help in some of those efforts through my service on the Chamber's Small Business Council. Through its work, the Chamber helped me get a seat at the table, and not just any table. It was a privilege to sit down with President Trump last year at the White House to discuss small business tax reform. I explained to him how much pro-growth reform would mean to small businesses like mine, and to the Americans that we employ. Excuse me, I've had a little bit under the weather. The Chamber gives voices to all businesses, whether in direct ways like helping facilitate this meeting or through its extensive advocacy efforts across Washington. So now it's my pleasure to introduce the man behind this outstanding institution. It's safe to say that the Chamber would not be what it is today without Tom Donohue. He has served as president and CEO for more than 20 years. He fights daily to defend free enterprise in Washington and across the country, and today he's going to tell us about the next phase in that fight. American business is picking up steam thanks to an excellent 2017. And now, in 2018, it's time to hit the throttle. We're about to learn how. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Tom Donohue.
Well, thank you very much, Brian. I was listening to you and reflecting on the video, and we stand here, I stand, and you sit here today in the Hall of Flags. The flags that depict, along with the ceiling here, the opening of the Western world. I was thinking, I hope that flag was made in America. And I was also thinking that we need to have you make a flag for us, something special that we'll put here where everybody will see it, maybe right in the lobby when they come in the door. We'll get a group to get together with you and make it a good business deal for you and a great civic and patriotic deal for us. And thank you very much for being here with us. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me say good morning and let me thank you very much for joining us today. At the outset of what promises to be another momentous year, the state of American business is strong and positioned to grow stronger still. After nearly a decade of muddling through our economy, it has at last achieved consecutive quarters, 2 of them, of 3% or higher growth. Barring any unforeseen circumstances, we expect stronger growth to continue this year and well into 2019. Unemployment has fallen to levels not seen since the beginning of this century, and hiring remains vigorous and wages are going up a bit. More people who have stayed on the sidelines when the labor markets were weaker are finally re-entering the workplace. And we've seen signs of stronger wage growth, as I said. Inflation and interest rates remain low by historical standards, though we know they're going to go up a bit, even as the Federal Reserve has begun that steady march to normalize monetary policy. The stock market is on a historic tear, with the Dow posting its largest annual gain ever, a whopping 5,000 points in 2017. It's off to a strong but up and down start this year, blowing through 25,000 last week. It's no wonder business optimism is rising, especially among the small businesses that often feel economic change most quickly and actively. How do we account for these improvements? Why do we think it happened? Simple. Better policies from Washington and some states, and a pro-growth mindset among more of our nation's private and public sector leaders. But there are always risks and developments that have the potential to upend our economy and reorder our priorities. A major mistake in Washington, such as withdrawal from NAFTA or defaulting on our debt, would undermine our growth. An upheaval in our own government would snap confidence, stroke uncertainty, and stymie progress on a pro-growth agenda. And any number of geopolitical hotspots could erupt any time with significant economic repercussions, from the potential for conflict in the Mideast to the threat of major terrorist attacks or cyber attacks. There's plenty of global risk. To be clear, we don't need everything to turn out just right for us to prosper this year. Our economy's underlying strength is deep and wide, so we can overcome some adversity. But if we can stay on track at home and events remain relatively stable abroad, we can expect the economic gains to continue. Now, we can't look at these numbers without looking all around the country at the people who are living and working in this economy. Because first and foremost, our economy is about people. And we must ask ourselves, are these economic gains being felt by all or even most Americans? While our economy is improving, the prosperity hasn't flowed to every community or every household. Families and workers are living in a time of rapid change and disruption that is driven by many factors, from automation and technology to globalization and greater productivity, to energy innovation, to the large-scale movement of jobs out of some communities and into others. These disruptions are creating economic insecurity for those who don't have the right skills or education, or who don't live in the right places to compete for today's jobs. So despite overall economic gains, we're still working hard to deal with workers who have lost their jobs due to plants or companies shutting down for one reason or another, and they're often left with very limited opportunities. If they want to keep working, they can stay put and take a big pay cut, or they can go where the hot jobs are. But many Americans don't have the means or the flexibility to up and move. They're frozen in place. We're seeing underemployed young people whose degrees don't match up with existing job opportunities, and they're shouldering mountains of student loan debt and have real questions about the value of their education. We're seeing entire communities plugged into distress, all at once dealing with joblessness, the opioid crisis, and long-term cycles of dependence. Facing these circumstances, many Americans have lost faith in core institutions, public and private alike. They don't believe that government or business understand the challenges that they face or are willing or able to address them. Many Americans are looking for reasons to explain their economic insecurity, for someone or something to blame, like trade or immigration or technology. And all of this has helped fuel the deep political divisions in our country today. Populism is on the rise on both sides. Nationalism and socialism are finding new supporters. These realities are very much on the minds of today's business leaders. This isn't the first time America has dealt with major change and disruption, and we always have to come out on top. But hope is not a strategy. The business community has a responsibility and a unique ability to offer solutions to address these challenges, and it all goes back to growth. Economic growth remains the best way to expand opportunity, to increase wealth, and to restore the American dream for the many, not for the few. For communities across the country, not just in urban centers and along the coast, and for the everyday American, this must be a concern of ours to return our nation to equality and opportunity for all. So growth must be strengthened. 0.75% growth, great, but we must make it last for a decade. And it must be sustained. We need policies that will support growth for years, not for quarters. And the benefits of growth must be shared broadly to advance opportunity and increase economic security. Let me be crystal clear. I'm not talking about cutting the existing pie into smaller and smaller pieces and passing them around. I'm talking about growing the economic pie so more people can get a bigger slice, so that growth must be inclusive and its benefits within the reach of all Americans. In order to achieve that stronger, sustained, shared growth, the Chamber today is unveiling a forward-looking agenda that will build on recent gains for the long term. We set the table for this agenda last year by helping start growth in two critical ways. The Chamber worked vigorously to help pass the first major tax overhaul in 31 years. The final package wasn't perfect, but it was pretty darn good. It achieved our priorities of lowering rates for all businesses, instituting an international competitive system of taxation, we don't want to pay twice, and allowing for full expensing of capital expenditures. Most important, it will usher in a new era of growth for the American economy. Upon passage, we saw a number of businesses immediately stand up and declare their plans to raise wages, give bonuses, boost charitable donations, and improve benefits. All thanks to the expected gains, not ones they've already received, from a more competitive and productive tax system. The second major pro-growth achievement last year was reining in the regulatory state after 8 long years of regulation run amok. Last year, we saw regulatory actions fall to a 17-year low, down 40% from their peak in 2011. And building on years of work, we helped unravel a slew of major Obama-era regulations, including sweeping rules that shackled our nation's energy resources and innovators, burdensome labor regulations that hampered business operations and directly harmed workers, and onerous financial rules that would have suppressed retirement investments and disadvantaged consumers. But there is more work to do. Regulatory burdens stemming from Obamacare still need to be dealt with. Employers continue to face escalating health care costs and market instabilities. On health care and more, the administration must now write new regulations to undo or replace bad ones and replace them with those that work. The Chamber will be closely involved. And we will continue advocating for systematic regulatory reform, including the passage of the Regulatory Accountability Act. It has been passed through the House. We will get it through the Senate, because if we don't do that, as soon as there is a change in political authority in this town, bye-bye to the advantages that we've already gotten. This is critical to preventing as well an onslaught of new rules without serious consideration of their effects. In addition to our federal efforts, we will also look to the states where business critics are shifting their focus, where trial lawyers are shifting their focus, and everybody trying to reinvent in the states what we've been able to change on the federal level. The Chamber's Institute for Legal Reform will push back against the state attorneys general who are picking up the mantle of regulation through over-enforcement. Through all of these initiatives and many more, continuing to reverse unworkable or unnecessary regulations will remain a major priority for the Chamber this year and going forward. Now, to build on recent economic gains and to make the most of them, we'll be focusing on several other issues in the year going forward. First, we must focus on our workers. Growth doesn't happen without people. the men and women who provide the energy, the ingenuity, and the ideas to power our economy. One of the most common concerns we hear from our members of all sizes and all industries and from across this country is that they can't find qualified workers they need if they're going to grow their business. The Chamber believes that we need an all-of-the-above approach to address the dual challenge of people without jobs and jobs without people. We need bold education reform. K through 12 education should focus on the foundation skills that'll help children learn how to learn. Too many American students quickly fall behind because they don't develop the basic reading and math skills on which to build. Higher education must be better aligned to the needs of our economy and show a real return on investment. Students, parents, and taxpayers are investing $400 billion a year in higher education. They must have the confidence that is what is being taught and what is being learned in American colleges and universities will translate into the credentials of value in the future. We also need to make it very clear that a 4-year degree is not the only path to prosperity. Work-based learning, like apprenticeships, can also help to create fulfilling careers. I'm proud to serve on the President's Task Force for Apprenticeship Expansion to help more Americans learn relevant skills and to get good-paying jobs. We need also to encourage lifelong learning. The jobs of the future will require it. Businesses must proactively develop and engage their workers to drive innovation and to adopt change. And all workers must be entrepreneurs when it comes to investing and upgrading their own skills. And we must get people off the sidelines and back on the job. And let me say this, especially men. Give me a minute to continue my thought. As of 2015, nearly 22% of working-age men were out of a job for a variety of reasons, from job displacement to disability and addiction. Research shows that the opioid epidemic alone is responsible for 20% of the drop in the men's labor force participation. Governments at every level, community organizers, and businesses all have a role to play here in addressing this epidemic. The Chamber will soon convene the leaders from these sectors to discuss a series of practical actions that can be taken now to support communities and support individuals and to curb this crisis. And while we're talking about keeping folks on the job, let's not overlook a vast pool of talent that is leaving the workforce in droves. 10,000 baby boomers are retiring every day. I read this and said, really? Really? I may be a little biased, but the experience and the expertise of older Americans is still very relevant and needed today in our workforce, so we should find ways to keep them engaged. It's going to be hard to replace that number of people. Who says we need to throw in the towel when you hit a certain age? Not me. And finally, we must reform our immigration system to meet the needs of our economy. I'm glad in that open meeting in the cabinet room yesterday, the president prodded people to get going on the subject. I'm not sure we agree on exactly what we'd like to do, but it's a good start anyway. A great place to start is by retaining the over 1 million individuals who are currently allowed to work here legally, but are at risk of losing that status and their place in our country. That includes 200,000 TPS beneficiaries who have been legally living and working here for up to 2 decades, but were just told they must leave our country by 2019. It includes 30,000 spouses of high-skilled visa holders who may be allowed to stay but not work. It includes the Dreamers, 690,000 young people brought here illegally as children through no fault of their own. These now hardworking individuals contribute their talents to our economy in integral ways, and we will lose them too if the Congress doesn't act soon to resolve this problem. The Chamber and our Center for Education and Workforce are looking at all of these complex challenges from every angle, promoting business-led solutions. The bottom line is that we can't strengthen and sustain economic growth if we don't expand and support our workforce, nor will Americans be able to share in the benefits of growth if they are locked out of our economy. Next, technology must be embraced as the growth driver and game changer that it is. Technology is not a single, all-powerful industry. It is now part of every industry. It will continue to change the way we work, communicate, and live at a rapidly accelerating pace. Even with these changes, technological advancement is an opportunity, not a threat. The Chamber's Technology Engagement Center, or CTEC, is helping business communities, policymakers, and workers understand and adapt to this new reality. This is essentially a broad sharing benefit of growth, especially in distressed communities that could really use a boost. But in some parts of the country, the barriers are significant. The 34 million Americans that don't have internet access are all but locked out of the new economy, both as consumers and entrepreneurs. Middle America also struggles to attract investment needed for high-growth startups. Currently, 2/3 of venture capital is concentrated in Silicon Valley, New York, Boston, and Washington. And many leaders around the country simply don't have enough information about how technology can be leveraged to strengthen state and local economies. The Chamber recently established a working group to promote the value of the new economy and to address the barriers standing in its way. Another priority is highlighting the ways technology is improving people's everyday lives, from better health care to streamlined small business operations to more productive family farms. This is especially important as a backlash against major tech companies is gaining strength, both at home and abroad, and among consumers and governments alike. We must be careful that this techlash doesn't result in broad regulatory overreach that stifles innovation and stops positive advances in their tracks. And even as we work to advance technology in our economy, we must also safeguard businesses and consumers from its risks, including cyber attacks, data privacy problems, and intellectual property theft. Technology will continue to be a major driver of stronger, sustained growth if we leverage it smartly and carefully. Many will benefit. To keep up with the changes of a growing economy, we must also modernize the infrastructure that allows for the movement of people, products, power, and information. We cannot build a 21st century economy on 20th century infrastructure, if it's that good. This year can and must be the year of major infrastructure investment. We have the political will, the bipartisan support, and we certainly have the need. So now is the time for action. The Chamber has been working with the administration to determine what a forward-looking infrastructure package should achieve. We must pay our way to the future by choosing projects of national significance that maximize long-term growth. We need to rebuild our roads and bridges and modernize them for technological change to come, including driverless cars. We need to improve and expand broadband so that every American can have access to digital opportunities in the new economy. And we need to revitalize our seaports and airports to handle the demands of an increasingly global and mobile economy. Water supply systems must be updated, many of them for the first time in a century, so that basic resources remain safe and available. And don't forget, we're also living in the midst of an energy renaissance, yet we don't have the infrastructure to support it. So we must revamp our power grid and build the pipelines necessary to transport our abundant resources to market. These long-term, nationally significant infrastructure projects will enable serious growth and job creation. But the big question, how do we pay for it? That's the problem that has troubled this debate for many years. We have a number of very constructive ideas and proposals which we'll lay out in significant detail at an infrastructure event that we'll have right here in this room, January the 18th. Please come. We're going to help jumpstart the conversation between public and private sector leaders. We're already talking to the White House and others in town, and people around the world as well, and people with money. To strengthen growth, we must also access our global markets, and that requires, ladies and gentlemen, smart trade policies. Trade is how we shape the reality of globalization to benefit American business, consumers, and workers. And if we weren't leading on trade, we're falling behind. I've been saying for years and years, and today we're seeing it happen. As the administration has pulled back on trade agreements, governments around the world have rushed forward to fill the void. The EU is striking major deals with Canada, Japan, Mexico, and the Trans-Pacific Partnership Group is now moving forward without U.S. involvement. This is a reminder that we are in a global competition to sell our products and services to the 95% of the global population that does not live in this country. So we must strengthen our trading partnerships, not weaken them, or worse, abandon them. Let's start in our own hemisphere with the North American Free Trade Agreement. Mexico and Canada and America are two largest trading partners, cause 14 million jobs to be created in this country, and has a annual trading exchange of over $1.3 trillion. Pardon me. The Chamber has said from the beginning that we support the effort to modernize this 24-year-old agreement. A modernization deal should account for the gains of North American energy revolution and add rules for digital trade. It should not close markets, undermine investment protections, or limit trade with regulatory red tape. Above all, Withdrawing from NAFTA would be a grave mistake. The American economy has taken several big steps forward with regulatory relief and tax reform, and this administration deserves a lot of credit. But a wrong move on NAFTA would send us 5 steps backwards. The same holds true with KORUS, a vital trade pact with a key ally in South Korea. And by the way, one of the strongest trade agreements we ever did, with lots of protections for American companies. We agree that in some areas, the Koreans need to do more to fully implement this agreement. But overturning it would hurt American farmers and manufacturers and benefit only our foreign competitors. Trade with China will also be high on the agenda this year. The White House is right and correct to focus on China's industrial policies and their challenges to the global economy. This includes Chinese market access restrictions, subsidies, data and cyber policies, forced tech transfer, and IP theft. At the same time, we have to remember that China is a major world power, an extraordinary potential market, and somebody that we have to deal with respect and strength. The status quo is not sustainable, but we need a smart approach. We need to work with our allies in Europe and Japan and elsewhere to forge a common response to China's state capitalism. The president says he wants more trade and more agreements with China. So do we. Let's do it in a way that works. So we need to get back on the offense. We need to bolster our trade and investment ties with strategic partners. India should be a top priority. We need to tap the potential of growing regions in the Middle East and in Africa. And we need to clinch new deals that will open markets, not undermine the ones we have. The bottom line is that growth will be weakened, not strengthened or sustained, if we pull back from trade. Next, in order to drive growth across our economy, U.S. businesses must have the resources to grow and the freedom to make decisions that will allow growth to continue. Today, even as our economy gains strength, there are some significant impediments and threats that are preventing businesses from starting to grow more and from going public as well. One is the lack of access to capital, especially for small and mainstream businesses. The period following the Great Recession marked an alarming turning point. For the first time, more businesses were being destroyed than created in this country. And we still haven't seen business creation rates bounce back to the pre-2008 levels. The administration and the Congress must unlock the resources needed to start and to grow businesses. We must have robust private markets and expand bank and non-bank lending to Main Street businesses. Another threat is the growing disincentive to go public. There are a number of reasons for this. We need to tackle all of them, including the role of proxy advisory firms. Some special interest activists, investors are pushing politically motivated agendas. Short-termism is forcing leaders to make decisions to satisfy quarterly goals instead of meeting long-term growth objectives. It's no wonder that we have half as many public companies today as we did in 1996. This is not simply a curiosity or an observation. This is a serious problem. Public companies are major contributors to job growth in this country. A huge amount of their work is done by small Main Street companies with whom they contract. And when more companies get to go public, it creates more opportunities for Main Street America to build wealth through their share ownership. To help address these problems, the Chamber is focusing on capital formation, supporting IPOs, and improving governance and investor protections. At the same time, our Institute for Legal Reform and our Litigation Center are continuing their efforts to curtail lawsuit abuse and overzealous plaintiff bars that also are a major drag on business growth. And businesses can't grow our economy if we can't grow. Finally, stronger growth and lasting prosperity must be built on a stable fiscal foundation. There is no greater threat to our country's long-term economic security than unsustainable entitlements. They are the true drivers of our nation's rising debt. And if left alone, major parts of our entitlement programs will, not very far down the road, go bankrupt, putting the economic security of vulnerable Americans at risk. Moreover, if we don't address this looming crisis soon, future generations will pay for our failings twice, not once, but twice. Once by shouldering the burden of massive debt they didn't incur, and again in lost opportunity as investments we should be making in our nation's competitiveness are sacrificed for runaway spending and debt service payments. Mandatory spending already gobbles up every dollar of federal income tax revenues that we collect. This is something I talk about nearly every year, and it's the only thing that really changes. It just gets bigger and bigger. Although now we're not counting it down in years. We're counting it down in years, not in decades. Many recognize that something must be done, but the reality is that the bipartisan leadership and national consensus needed for real change does not exist today. Just for a quick number, for the September fiscal year, the end of the fiscal year in September, interest on the debt, Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security ate 75% of every dollar that Americans spent, that the government of the United States spent in that fiscal year. Interest rates are starting to go up. More and more people are living longer and longer. It'll be 80% before you know it. How do you have a military? How do you support education? How do you do the fundamentals of what Americans expect from their government? Public support for entitlement reform will remain very low. No wonder. And do you think that Congress really wants to deal with this? It's the quickest way, they think, to get unelected. But broad parts of this country are particularly economically vulnerable here, and as long as hardworking Americans struggle and make ends meet, we're in trouble. So we've got to drive growth, if just to put people in a better mood economically, so we can have the courage and the vision to take on the entitlement issue. Growth alone won't solve our entitlement crisis, but I fundamentally believe that we can, working together in a really bipartisan way, do something with this, and if we don't, it will do it to us. And so this is another critical reason to advance the policies that will strengthen economic growth, sustain it, and most importantly, share its benefits broadly. Now, I can't finish without talking a little bit about elections. To have a fighting chance of succeeding on the policy objectives we've talked about, we need the right people in Washington. We have our work cut out for us heading into this next midterm election. A lot of people already think they know how things are going to turn out in November. And remember, from 2016, a lot of very smart people can be wrong. They said there was no way we could keep a pro-business majority in the House and the Senate, and no one expected a businessman in the White House. The chamber doesn't engage in presidential politics, but in 2016, our voter education efforts helped deliver significant gains in the Congress. We're going to double down our efforts this year, coming up to the 2018 election. First of all, and most important, candidates matter. And we've got a challenge here. We have a lot of people retiring because they're losing their chairmanships to tenure and those sort of things. And we've got to go out and find the best candidates we can that want to come to government to govern. We're working closely with state and local chamber partners to recruit good candidates. And we'll support those who understand why growth is important and who are committed to governing so we can achieve that growth. And by the way, that will require a willingness to reach across the aisle. Remember, many big priorities like infrastructure and entitlement reform can only be done in a bipartisan way. If we're only sending ideological purists and strict partisans to Washington, we're stopping progress before it can even start. So if we're going to fight back against the extremes of both parties, of Steve Bannon and Elizabeth Warren, those people do not represent the best interests of this country. We need to rebuild the middle in the Congress. Pro-growth, pro-business candidates can come from both sides, and we want more from both sides. Second, many of the most critical races will be determined in the primaries, not the general election. So we're going again to play a very aggressive role in the key primary contests. Third, we must turn out the business vote. The candidate and the operation that gets the most people to the polls wins, period. We will enlist the help of local chambers to turn out our members and businesses, business leaders to turn out their everyday employees, not just the people that work in the executive office. We need the people that serve those companies that go to the polls. We'll also spread the message that it is in the vital interest of every American family to have a growing economy, and they ought to go vote for it. When the pro-growth agenda succeeds, America succeeds. Now, before I close, I want to mention just one other priority that must be central to our growth efforts this year. It's not another policy prescription or a political tactic. It is a principle that undergirds our society and system of free enterprise, and that it is allowing people and groups to speak freely and participate in the civil discourse. We won't make much progress in any of these priorities if we aren't able to articulate our positions in a compelling way, win the hearts and minds, build a consensus, and encourage compromise. That's tough to do in a deeply divided 50-50 nation. The decline of the political center has amplified the more ideological voices on both sides. The result is a less civil, more bombastic political conversation that, frankly, disgusts many Americans and prevents our government from solving their problems. In this environment, there's a growing faction of people who are no longer content to argue the merits of their ideas. They simply want to silence their opponents and shut them out of the debate. We're seeing the erosion of free speech on college campuses, in the demonization of political opponents, in media bias, in efforts to control or silence people, institutions, and businesses through intimidation tactics or smear campaigns. And it is a major driver of the division and dysfunctioning that is gripping this nation. What we need today is more debate, on the big questions facing our government and our economy, our society, not less debate. We need more points of view in the public dialogue, not political correctness or speech restrictions. The business community has long fought to protect the right to be heard because we believe passionately in the merits of our ideas and are more than willing to defend them in the public square. And we believe that if given the chance to truly hear and consider those ideas, most Americans will see merit in them. So today, we must elevate the fight to protect free and open speech, not just to advance our ideas and interests, but to preserve one of the key principles on which our nation was built. There can be no progress towards policies that will help the greatest number of people if leaders aren't able to come together and exchange ideas and reach common ground. There can be no prosperity without competition allowing the best ideas, products, and services to prevail. That's what drives growth and a higher standard of living. In short, there can't be free enterprise without free speech. And free enterprise is the foundation on which our nation's legacy and future rest. So is the state of American business today? It's strong, but determined to grow stronger. Business is determined to be the voice of reason and a bridge between both sides. We're determined to help when necessary to correct our government as it does the nation's business. We're determined to help lead our country through this period of rapid change so that it emerges stronger, more competitive, and more secure. We're determined to help restore optimism for the discouraged, opportunity for the downtrodden, and mobility for all. And we are determined to help turn growth today into prosperity that endures. We're confident that we can succeed because business is and always has been a powerful force for positive change. Today, the economic winds are at our backs. There is so much we can do this year and beyond to make America more prosperous and hopeful, and this time, not just for a few, but for everyone. So let's get going. Let's keep growing. And I want to thank you first for coming today, for your attention, and for your patience while we went through a very long list of very important things that our nation requires. It's long because we have much to do, much to correct, and much to grow. I thank you very much. I look forward to meeting with you individually and catching up with you. And don't forget, on the 18th, we're going to have a heck of a thing on infrastructure. Thank you.